What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to AKP Sports Talk. It's been a while, but we're back here previewing the playoffs, NFL playoffs that start tomorrow. It's Friday, January 13th, Friday the 13th. And tomorrow on Saturday starts the wild card round of the playoffs. But first, Korea, how are you doing?
Look, it's a spooky time today. Obviously, Friday the 13th. Hope you're wearing white. No bad luck coming your way, especially for some first round opponents like, the Chargers and Jags. We just learned that Mike Williams is out. So definitely a little scary for this Chargers team not having one of their best receivers. We've obviously the whole week we've been wondering whether the two quarterbacks, Tua and Lamar, are going to be playing against their opponents this weekend. They're both out. This first round was going to have a lot of surprises potentially, but now with some of the key guys out, it's going to be interesting to see what really does happen tomorrow and heading into Monday and Wild Card Weekend, which has some very interesting matchups, a lot of divisional matchups, exactly for Wild Card Weekend.
Yeah, we can just get right into it, and we'll get into the first game, a game that both of us have a lot of personal interest in between the Seahawks and 49ers. 49ers, the 2 seed. The Seahawks squeak into the number 7 seed when they beat the Rams in Week 18, and the Lions beat the Packers on Sunday night. Like you said, a lot of divisional matchups in this wildcard round, and this is one of them. The 49ers ended the regular season. It was, I believe, 10 games in a row that they won. They swept the Seahawks in the regular season. But this is the playoffs. And so last year, the Niners swept the Rams in the regular season and lost them in the playoffs. It's going to be interesting because, Brock Purdy did his job when he came in to start for the 49ers. But, the playoffs are definitely always a different animal than the regular season. But obviously the Niners don't even need him to be great to, advance in the playoffs. I'm super conflicted because I talked about in our previous episodes that before the season I had the Niners Bills in the Super Bowl. But obviously, we're both Seahawks fans, so I don't want that to happen. But Korea, what's kind of your takeaways and predictions for this game?
Look, before I even get into this prediction, I just have some things to address. First of all, to all those Packer fans saying, the Seahawks shouldn't be in, the Lions should be in. I want y'all to shut the hell up right now, okay? I'm sick of this. Everyone says, the Lions should be in. Well, the Lions should be in too, but the Seahawks should definitely be in because they finished better than last year, okay? Over 500, 9-8, because this team was 7-10 last year, okay? And people were saying that Geno wasn't doing enough last year, and most of those games that the Seahawks lost, those are one score games that could have gone either way. So basically saying the Seahawks could have finished the same last year with Russell Wilson and a little bit of Geno Smith as they did this year. Obviously, that's the first thing. The second thing is this Seahawks team has definitely surprised a lot of people. No one had this team, even Vegas. Vegas had this team winning 5 games this year. And I think that was the over-under, 5 games. So for us to finish over 500 is a win in itself in a rebuilding franchise. Obviously, you mentioned the 49ers and Seahawks, division rivals. We know this is the team for me that I absolutely despise. And I know, obviously, for you, this has more personal interest because you have an ongoing bet between the Bills and Niners Super Bowl. And, obviously those are pretty much, I guess, a lot of consensus, the favorite Super Bowl matchup right now because of how hot the Niners are playing, as you mentioned, on that 10-game winning streak. The defense has been doing a lot of work as well. Obviously, we can't discredit that with the race, excuse me, the fast, not Nick Bosa. For some of those who don't know, he's a little bit of a racist. And then, Dre Greenlaw, whether it's Fred Warner, Tayshaun Gibson in the secondary, they have speed. And that linebacker duo is the best linebacker duo in football. I mean, with the way that Warner and Greenlaw play together, it's very complementary. They take over that whole middle part of the field. And that's one of the ways the Seahawks really like to beat opponents down is those short passes, whether it's the middle of the field. We saw it in the last time these two teams met, where the whole middle of the field was just pretty much taken away by those two, and the defense was very opportunistic. We saw that also in the first game that these two faced, all the way back in week 2. Obviously, that was the game Trey Lance got injured in, but now this is the first game in San Fran since that game. But I did see a report that there's going to be some wind and some interesting weather, so that could also play a factor because any kind of weather can affect the game, whether it's negative or positive for both teams. And there's also the looming question, well, Brock Purdy's the rookie QB. Obviously he's been the sensation ever since both Trey Lance and Jimmy Garoppolo went down earlier in the season. Now what can he do in his first playoff start? And rookies usually don't do well in the playoffs. There's only been a few quarterbacks that have a few rookie quarterbacks that have gotten wins in the playoffs, and one of them is Russell Wilson. One is TJ Yates. So that's the comparison that we have to go with here. So, obviously as a Seahawks fan, if the Niners win, I'm not going to be horribly upset. Obviously, I will be upset to the fact that the Niners won. But as a Seahawks fan, I know in myself that, this has been a great season. And, we look like an attractive place, an attractive market for the offseason, because all we really need is a front line defensively. Our O-line needs to get older. The secondary needs to get more healthy, and bam, look at that. So that makes Seattle more of an attractive place. I want to pick the Seahawks because I'm never going to go against the Hawks here, but I will not going to be surprised just because how outmatched these two teams are, with the Niners just being that team defensively. And, Brock Purdy is actually not doing bad for a rookie quarterback. And that's the thing. Like, people are saying he's all these people who are saying that he's the GOAT and all this and the best quarterback. And I'm like, shut up. I'm like, just stop it. It's nonsense. But I will give credit where it's due. He has thrown the ball really accurately. George Kittle's been a huge, huge part of that offense for them. They just got Deebo Samuel back. I believe Christian is questionable, but I'm pretty sure he's going to play. They still have a lot. They got Elijah Mitchell back. Big addition for that offense. They still have Brandon Ayuk, who is a good target as well. All the names that Brock Purdy has at his disposal offensively. And that's how they and the last time the Seahawks played this Niners team, they didn't have Deebo Samuel. So now that they have Deebo Samuel back at their disposal, it's hard to say the Niners aren't going to lose this game. Obviously, Vegas thinks that the Seahawks are going to get absolutely whooped by this Niners team. But, as you mentioned, the Niners last year, they swept the Rams in the regular season, but when they met in the NFC Championship, the Rams won at home. And, obviously it was a home game, but, now the Niners are in that position. The Niners can have this kind of closing window of opportunity right now because, it's kind of win now. They're in win now mode. And if they don't get it done this year, then when is the year going to be for them? And for the Seahawks, obviously, they have nothing to play for. We saw the video of Geno Smith hitting the gritty with Pete Carroll on the scooter riding by, Quandre Diggs doing 3 pumps in the air. The Seahawks are having fun. And they're having fun because they're a team that has nothing to lose. And that is what the mentality is. And so that's where, a team that has nothing to lose is the most dangerous team to face in the playoffs. And, even though it's not as much of a comparison, I'm seeing a lot of comparisons to this Bengals team of last year that was overestimated, and then coming into the playoffs, even though they obviously had the home field in the first round, they still were a team that was overlooked. And so that makes me want to pick the Seahawks. But on paper, the Niners should win this by almost 17. But my personal score prediction, and what I hope would happen, the Seahawks win a gritty game, like 20-17. I feel like this rain and this weather may play a huge effect because I saw a wind potentially of like over 20 miles an hour. And the whole Bay Area has pretty much just been having this complete storm, and the cyclones and the horrible weather. So, that'll definitely play into a part. So my gut, my heart is telling me Seahawks are going to win 20-17. but my brain and logic is telling me the Niners are going to win probably like 24-14.
Yeah, I mean, I'm in the same boat. Like, I'm picking the 49ers to win, but I don't think I've ever hoped to be more wrong of a prediction that I made. Um, like you said, they're playing with nothing to lose, the Seahawks. Like, no one expected them to make the playoffs in the first place and have a top five pick with it not being, their own pick, being top five. So I mean, the Seahawks to have a chance in this game are going to have to pull out, some tricks and some, like what Dan Campbell and the Lions did to beat the Packers last Sunday with, when they had like the hook and ladder, like some plays like that, trick plays. And, with the weather, it's looking like heavy rain, heavy wind is going to make it tougher to have some of those like trick plays where you kind of, like a flea flicker or a trick play where you go deep or something. So that, I mean, that's another kind of, what's the word, like upgrade, I guess, for the 49ers because they have a better run game and a better defense. And normally in the rain, that's what you're kind of banking on. So, I mean, it's a playoff divisional game where, obviously a lot of crazy things can happen. So, I'm picking the 49ers to win, like prediction bracket, all that wise, but I've never, like I said, I've never hoped to be more wrong before. So no one expected the Seahawks to make it this far, and hopefully they can find some way to force some turnovers, get pressure on Purdy. Geno Smith gets rid of the ball quickly and doesn't let the pressure get to him from the Niners defensive line. And all of that goes right. And, hopefully they can find the way to prevail. But like you said, regardless of the result, it's been a successful season for the Seahawks and a lot to build on for next year with two, top 20, top 25 picks and a good amount of cap, I believe, also just used in free agency as well. So, so we'll move on to the second Saturday game. And like you mentioned earlier, Mike Williams, who played in a meaningless game last week where the Chargers had nothing to play for, he got hurt. He wasn't able to practice all week, and he's out. So that's a pretty big loss for the Chargers, even though he was out for a good part of the season anyways. But you have the Jaguars coming off their winner-go-home game against the Titans last week where they prevailed. And then the Chargers, after they just missed the playoffs last year, are in the playoffs this year. Two young quarterbacks, Trevor Lawrence, Justin Herbert, in Jacksonville, so it's a long flight as well for the Chargers across country. Two great running backs, Eckler, Etienne. Who do you have in this one?
Yeah, first, I mean, you talk about the unbelievable coaching decision by Brandon Staley to have his players play a meaningless game against the Broncos last week, because obviously that came back to bite them with no Mike Williams, who got injured in that game, and Joey Bosa was injured in that game as well, and I believe he's still questionable for tomorrow. I don't know if he's playing. I don't know if they've ruled him out yet or not, but just a really questionable coaching call by Staley. For a team that had not made the playoffs since that 2018 season. And, there was so much hype for this team, but then they just got more and more injured. And, the Chargers definitely are a scary team when they're fully healthy. And that's the if, because they get injured like it's almost like a contagious disease or something. Like Keenan Allen, who's missed so much time this season, Mike Williams, who has been in and out and now is out in a playoff game for them. Those are key members of the offense. Their defense, J.C. Jackson went down in that, I believe, the Seahawks game. Joey Bosa has been injured. There have been so many key guys that have been injured. I mean, it's not an injury, but Derwin James getting suspended for that big hit against Indianapolis. Those are some big losses throughout games, even though the Chargers held on to win that game. And then you have the Jaguars, who are kind of in the similar position as Seattle. They have nothing to play for because they didn't have any expectations heading into the season. Now, yes, they were hopes that Trevor Lawrence would step up from his previous year to this year. There were hopes of, maybe seeing what Etienne could do on the ground. Now he has his college quarterback with him. There was a little bit of a question after Jacksonville paid so much for Christian Kirk, and everyone was like, why are they giving so much money to Christian Kirk? Well, they really just proved everybody wrong. I mean, Trevor Lawrence stepped up his game. There's Nick Wright of FS1. I hate how right he is about this, but the comparisons between Trevor Lawrence in year 2 and Peyton Manning look really, really similar. In fact, Trevor is looking a little better just because he has that ability to be able to run. And I feel like his game is just going to get better and better as the offense starts to build in Jacksonville. And, it's becoming really interesting to see how good this Jaguars team can be. Defensively, obviously, that is the one thing that's really holding them back. They allowed, I think it's the most yards per game in terms of pass yards. They don't have a good secondary. It's more of a reliant on the Jacksonville offense because the offense is really good, obviously, with Etienne, as you mentioned, having a great season for his rookie campaign, obviously, since he got injured last year. And, Lawrence has stepped up, Zay Jones, Marvin Jones, and Christian Kirk. That's a good 1-2-3 duo. Even Evan Ingram, who, no one expected to be a contributor to this team, is really putting himself out there and having some great games. But, this is the most exciting game of the weekend, in my opinion, between these two teams that are definitely on the rise. And I can definitely see these two teams winning a lot more in their divisions or a lot more games next year. With this Mike Williams injury, though, I'm leaning toward the Jaguars now just because, Justin Herbert lost his deep threat. Mike Williams was the deep threat who can make any catch and make it look pretty and get both feet in bounds somehow. And you lose that ability. And then Keenan Allen, obviously, he's his go-to guy. But, next to him, I mean, it's going to be Joshua Palmer or DeAndre Carter. And that's not the Mike Williams that they've hoped for. And obviously, you mentioned they're heading to Jacksonville. And, Duval is going to be absolutely going bananas. It's going to be very loud tomorrow night. So just because of that, I have the Jags pulling this out. It's going to be very close, and it's going to be high scoring. I think it's going to be like a 31-30 Jags win, game-winning field goal. It's going to be very close, but I think the Jaguars prevail at home.
Yeah, I mean, I was already leaning towards the Jaguars, even if Mike Williams was healthy, and him being out has me leaning towards them even more. You talked about their offense and all the weapons they had and how, a lot of people questioned some of their signings this offseason and how they obviously panned out. I think the Jaguars are also their defense has actually been a lot better the second half of the season compared to early in the season. But, the Chargers are still going to, have their way, I think, offensively. They've been one of the worst defenses, I believe, in terms of allowing receptions and running back. So Austin Eckler should have a huge role, in the passing like he always does. And then Keenan Allen, and we'll see, probably one of Josh Palmer, Gerald Everett, DeAndre Carter, one of those three step up kind of in the absence of Mike Williams, as we saw during the regular season. But yeah, I'm expecting a close game as well, a tight game that comes down to the end. I'll say 27-24 Jaguars, so another field goal game. I think it should be tight throughout. I think we might see kind of a slow start from both teams, and then kind of a more offense in the second half. But yeah, I mean, just between the cross country, the travel for the Chargers, the momentum the Jaguars have heading into the playoffs, that's what has me leaning towards their way in this game. So now we'll head over to Sunday's games. I think that this is the biggest spread, I think, ever in the wild card game. It's currently 13.5 for the Bills. Obviously, we haven't recorded in a while. Obviously, they're playing for DeMar Hamlin and everything that happened to him. It's great to hear that he's, out of the hospital within like a week, basically, or around a week. So obviously they're playing for him in this playoffs, and that starts with a game against Skylar Thompson and the Dolphins. The Dolphins, with the Patriots losing to the Bills in Week 18, the Dolphins squeaked into the playoffs with their 9-6 win over the Jets, led by Thompson in that game. I don't think there's that much to say. With Tua and Bridgewater out, career. If you're betting, would you take the -13.5 for the Bills in this game?
Oh, I definitely would. Even though the Bills, were struggling to handle a Patriots team last week and Mac Jones, I mean, it took them 2 kickoff returns, and obviously the whole story with Damar Hamlin. It's just I'm glad that he is doing better. Obviously, a very scary scene from that Monday night game. He's been in all of NFL and NFL fans, everyone's hearts for these past few weeks. But I'm glad to hear that he is getting out of the hospital and he's going home. So that's definitely just added to what an emotional season the Bills have had. I mean, and not even just the Damar Hamlin situation. We go back a few months ago when Dawson Knox lost his brother. And, that's just another thing they're playing for. And, when back even before that, when there was that shooting at the Buffalo supermarket, all the way back earlier in the offseason, there's just so much stuff that they're playing for. And, it's just hard not to root for the Bills. So, I definitely see the Bills covering the spread. Even against this Dolphins team that even though the last time they did play them in Buffalo, it was very close. And, everyone was talking about, Tua thinks it's probably going to be cold up there and, all that stuff. I mean, it was cold, but, the Dolphins held their own, but that was with Tua. Not Skylar Thompson here. Let's get that straightened up here. Skylar Thompson, I mean, what about a start? I mean, I feel like this Dolphins team is the Dolphins from the last time they made the playoffs. They had, I think, Ryan Tannehill as the quarterback. He was doing so well. Then he got injured, and then they had to put in Matt Moore in that playoff game, and the Pittsburgh Steelers beat them down east side. And that's the same thing that's going to happen with the Bills. They're going to beat them down. The Bills are definitely one of the better teams in this playoff race right now. Obviously, Josh Allen is just getting it done offensively, and he's having an MVP caliber season. Stephon Diggs, even though he hasn't been as much of a target these past couple weeks, he is still, that deep threat that we saw last week. It only takes one throw, and that's the thing with Josh Allen. It only takes one throw, and if it's accurate and if it's going somewhere deep, it's probably going to land in the hands of Stephon Diggs or Gabe Davis or whoever it is downfield. And this Bills team is so scary, and I just don't know. Even though the Dolphins, they have Xavier Howard on defense and they know how to get pressure, and that's the one thing the Bills have not done is stopping pressure up front for the most part, forcing Josh Allen to scramble a lot. The way this Bills team looks, even with the scramble, Josh Allen will find someone or he'll run it himself, and I feel like the Bills will cover the spread. I have the Bills winning. I'm going to go with 24-10. I just feel like, or even 24-7. I just feel like this Miami team that really struggled against the Jets defense, last week in a must-win game, even though, the Jets offensively are one of the worst teams in football, defensively, they're one of the best. And the Miami offense with Skylar Thompson last week wasn't getting anything moving. So now in a playoff game in Buffalo, we know the whole story with Buffalo and Damar Hamlin and everything. With Josh Allen, the Bills are definitely going to cover the spread.
Yeah, I mean, I could even see it being like a 34-10, something like that. Like it should be. I mean, obviously, you never know in the playoffs, but I mean, I don't see how Skylar Thompson leads them to more than maybe 3 scoring drives at most. And the Bills should, have no trouble pouring it on the Dolphins defense. So yeah, I mean, it should be a pretty easy win for the Bills. Now we'll move on to another interesting game between the Giants and the Vikings. These two teams met a few weeks ago. The Giants tied it up with 2 minutes left on a touchdown, 2-point conversion, and the Vikings won on a 60-yard field goal by Greg Joseph. So it was a really close game. And now they meet again in Minnesota. Giants, another surprise team this year under first-year coach. Are we back?
We good?
Yeah. Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Another team that has not much to lose, and then the Vikings. Obviously, they were the number 2 seed for most of the regular season, and they ended on a really bad note, getting crushed by the Packers in Week 17, and then they beat the Bears in Week 18, where they're resting everyone, so that win didn't really mean much. So they're the 3 seed. It's a 3-point spread for the Vikings, so another close game is projected to be. A lot of people I've seen do have the Giants winning this game. Are you one of those people?
I'm sorry, Ari. I forgot. How long was that field goal that Greg Joseph had to kick?
It was like 60 plus.
Exactly. That's what I'm talking about right there. The Giants are going to win this game. This is my upset of the weekend. The reason I have this win is because even in a close loss where Brian Dable rested all of his starters last week against the Eagles, who obviously didn't have that much to play for, but, in a game where Jalen Hurts was playing and, they kind of needed a win to get that number 1 seed. They still played very close. It was a 6-point game in Philadelphia. And now the Giants, on a full week of health, an extra week of health. So that means, more rest for Saquon, more rest for Danny Dimes himself, Daniel Jones. Also, that whole defense with Kayvon Thibodeau and, what the Giants are doing. And as you mentioned, the last time these two teams, it was a classic, obviously, the 60s plus something yard field goal from Greg Joseph sent the Vikings. And, part of me is wanting to pick the Vikings because, the Vikings, obviously, they rested most of their starters after maybe a couple drives last week as well. Kirk Cousins, looked horrible in that Packers game the week before, as we mentioned. One of his worst games I think I've ever seen. But he did bounce back a little bit against the Bears. But, I mean, it's the Bears. They're the worst team in football on defense. And they didn't have Justin Fields. So it's really hard for me to choose the Vikings just because what I last saw from the true Vikings team was abysmal. Packers were locking them down left, right, and center. And I think that exposed them for how to stop their offense. And their offense wasn't getting anything done at all. And I feel like this Giants team, obviously, now looking for revenge from I forgot what week it was, from their loss in that same building. I feel like this Giants team is going to come out with a lot more energy. And that's why I kind of want to lean toward them to get the win here. I just feel like this Vikings team is a little bit overrated. And, yes, they're the comeback kings this year. And, they know how to win those close games and, come back and somehow pull it off. And that's great. And, the offense looks great under Kevin O'Connell. Like I said, I told everyone, I said the Vikings are winning this division. And look what happened. People were turning to me saying, oh, what? The Vikings aren't winning. Yes, they are. And look at that. So the Vikings, yes, have one of the best offenses in football. The Vikings, yes, are comeback kings this year. But in a game where all the Giants need to do is just run the ball down the Vikings' throats. Pause. All they need to do is just run the ball because that's what they do best. As soon as they started using Daniel Jones as that dual threat quarterback, I feel like that took their game to a whole nother level because, obviously there's the whole threat of Saquon Barkley and everyone is crowding the line because he's impossible to tackle. But, Daniel Jones got legs and we've seen it many times, whether it was the game where he ran for so many yards against the Eagles where he slipped and fell at the end, or whether it was the game against I think it was the Colts not too long ago where he had 4 touchdowns and which was balling. I have the Giants winning another close battle. I think this is going to be a little high scoring, but not too much. I'm going 27-24 instead of my man Greg Joseph getting that great game-winning field goal. It's going to be Graham Gano for the New York Giants getting that game-winning field goal.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of me that wants to take the Giants, with the way the Vikings are trending. And like you said, the Giants, rested their starters last week, so they'll be, fully rested for this game and ready. I'm I'm still leaning towards the Vikings at home, prevailing just the better offense. I know they look terrible against Green Bay, but it's a different divisional rival game. It's different, than a game like this against the Giants. Giants defense is getting more healthy, which I think they're more healthy than they were in that last matchup. So that's definitely a plus for them. So yeah, I mean, there's definitely a lot of reason to like the Giants here, and I think they're a team that I'll be rooting for in this game. But prediction-wise, bracket-wise, I have the Vikings pulling it out 30-24 in another one possession game. But yeah, it's definitely probably is the toughest game for me to pick this week. It's between this and the Chargers Jaguars, but with Mike Williams out, I think that this game is the toughest game for me to choose out of just just how close the two teams are in comparison. But I have the Vikings prevailing at home. So now we'll move on to another divisional matchup Sunday night. Ravens Bengals. Lamar Jackson tweeted an update on his injury the other day, and he won't be playing. So it's looking like it's going to be another week of Tyler Huntley starting for the Ravens. The Bengals are 9-point favorites, so not quite as bad as the Dolphins, but still, it's still a pretty high. I guess it would be the third highest because the Seahawks are 9.5-point underdogs, so the third highest spread of this weekend. It's not often where you have three, near or at double-digit spreads, in the playoffs, but here we are. Obviously, I assume you're taking the Bengals to win, but are you taking them to cover the 9-point spread?
I would take the Bengals to cover that 9-point spread just because, these two teams are literally fresh off of just meeting each other last week. This playoff team, I don't even think Baltimore went home. I think they just said, you know what, we'll extend our stay at the random hotel that they're staying at for another week because that's literally what this matchup is. And the Bengals, look, it was obviously an emotional night for the Bengals as well in that whole DeMar Hamlin situation. And, obviously it was just hard to see, T. Higgins get a lot of hate online, and I just didn't like that at all. But anyways, I feel like this Bengals team, just after meeting this team and, the Ravens, obviously the bigger question was, is Lamar going to play? And, his injury came out and turns out it was, I think, a grade 2 strain or sprain in his knee. And obviously he's not mobile, so he's out and they have to rely on Huntley, I believe. And, last week they had Brown and Brown wasn't doing good. So I don't know if Huntley will do any better. Huntley really hasn't been, the consistent backup quarterback that, the Ravens have hoped for just because he has a similar play style to Lamar Jackson with that dual threat. Obviously, there is that, so it's not like there's a huge difference in offensive scheme between the two. But at the same time, the Ravens aren't, fully healthy either, and I just don't really like the way they were trajecting into the playoffs. And meanwhile, the Bengals are one of the more scarier teams in the playoffs right now, and I feel like they will definitely be a team to watch out for in the second round. So I have the Bills barely covering the spread, though. I think it's going to be more like a 31-21 win for the Bengals.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think that my score is probably 27-13. So, pretty handily. I think the Dolphins struggling to score, the Ravens as well. I mean, last year Huntley saw the field a little bit, and he looked pretty good last year. Competent enough to be able to at least keep the Ravens competitive. But this year, he just hasn't been anywhere near as productive as he was last season. So, yeah, I think the Bengals are going to win pretty easily. I mean, the Ravens defense, I think, will keep them in the game, most of the way. But the Bengals will prevail and pull away, in the fourth quarter. And I think they will cover the 9-point spread and win by double digits and advance to what would be a Bills-Bengals divisional round, which would be much anticipated, obviously, for a number of different reasons. So now we'll move on to the finale, probably the most anticipated game of this wildcard weekend. Two teams with a lot of charismatic fan bases and a lot of history or recent history for the Buccaneers with Brady. Then you got the Cowboys. The Buccaneers, the worst division in the NFL this year, and they won it, and so now they're hosting a playoff game. You have the Cowboys, who don't have much momentum themselves heading into the NFL playoffs, coming off their loss to Sam Howell and the Commanders with their starters playing last week, week 18. The Cowboys are currently a 2.5-point favorite on the road heading into Tampa Bay. Brady's never lost to the Cowboys, I believe, is the stat. Korea, who you got here?
How about them Cowboys? Oh, how bad about them Cowboys? Because man, have they been playing horribly. And last week was a perfect example. I mean, it's crazy to think that Dak Prescott has played, I think, 3 or 4 less games on the season than most of the starting quarterbacks, but yet leads the league in interceptions just because he is absolutely hurling the ball at a negative rate. It is going straight into the defender's hands. Some of them obviously aren't all his fault, but for the most part, it's going right to the defense. And last week was a perfect example. Literally, from almost his own end zone, Dak Prescott drops back, steps up, throws across his body. I think it was in the direction of CeeDee Lamb. Defender cheats the route and just goes back for a pick six. And the way that Tampa Bay's defense has been playing as of recently, they've definitely improved. Yes, last week was a rough week for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, obviously, but they did rest a lot of their starters, and it was an ugly, ugly division. As you mentioned, not even a team over 500. Definitely reminiscent of the 7-9 Seahawks or the 7-9 Washington football team who went on and win the 2020 NFC least division. Now it's the NFC South, looking horrible this year, and it's kind of crazy that this Buccaneers team is really scary for the Cowboys. This is the match that the Cowboys did not want, but kind of stumbled into. And, a 12-5 Cowboy team against an 8-9 Buccaneers team, you would think that the Cowboys, the way that they've played all season, would be dominant winners or, have a bigger spread just because, of how well their defense has played. And it's only a 3-point spread because Tom Brady knows how to beat the Cowboys. Tom Brady has never lost to the Cowboys. We know the record. It's 7-0. He could be 8-0 on Monday night. And if I'm a Cowboys fan, I'm scared because they're going to Tampa Bay, obviously. So that's already across the country. Tampa Bay's going to be ruckus. It's a prime time. It's on Monday, extra rest for Brady and them. And, I just feel like Brady is going to somehow pull this off. I don't know how. I don't know why, but the writing is in the walls. The writing is literally right over here in the walls. It's saying that, Brady's undefeated. The Cowboys have looked so bad the last few weeks of the season. Dak Prescott can't get the offense going. They only put up 6 points against Sam Howell and the Washington Commanders. Sam Howell was driving down their defense looking like the next Joe Montana, for God's sakes. I mean, let's be real here. I don't really see the Cowboys somehow winning. I feel like this game is going to be close. Obviously, these two teams play close because, they've kicked off the season for either Thursday night or Sunday night 2 years in a row. And the two matchups we saw, the first one was a really close game between the Cowboys and Bucks. And then this year on Sunday night, the Bucks went into Jerry Rowland and just beat down that defense, and Dak Prescott wasn't getting anything done. So now it's crazy that not only they're facing week 1 in the playoffs, but week 1 as well in the regular season. So now I feel like this game's going to be low scoring as well. I believe that Tampa Bay is going to hold on for the win 20-14 and move on to the second round.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think, pressure on both quarterbacks is going to be a big kind of theme, I think, for both, defensive lines and both teams. But Brady is arguably the best quarterback in the league at adjusting and those quick passes when he faces that pressure. And we saw him kind of find that rhythm again with Mike Evans a couple of weeks ago against the Panthers. Obviously, the Cowboys defense is tougher than Carolina, but still just kind of finding that connection again, I think was big, for momentum heading into the playoffs. I think establishing the run is going to be big also for both teams. Both strong run defenses and good pass rushes as well. So I agree with it being low scoring. Yeah, I'll go like 23-17 Bucks. So similar score, basically a lot of field goals. Not too many touchdowns, but yeah, I think Brady does prevail in the end at home. So I think that will do it for this episode. We should be back live sometime next week where we'll kind of recap all these games and then we'll preview, obviously, the divisional round next week as well. And then we have spring training in I think less than a month now. Pitching catches are reporting, so we have MLB right around the corner. We have obviously NBA in full swing and all that. So we'll get into all that next week. But thank you all for tuning in today. We hope you all have a great weekend and hopefully we get some great games this weekend and not a lot of blowouts like what the spreads are anticipating. But yeah, we'll see you all next week. Thank you all for tuning in. Please leave a like if you haven't already and subscribe to this channel. And we'll catch you all next week.